Thank you everybody for coming out. So I'm Paul Mazzucco. I'm the Chief Security Officer for TierPoint. For those who don't know, I'm not gonna be salesy. I'm not here to try and convince you all that we're the best company in the world. I'm here today to kind of go over the business of security and some of the new attack vectors. This is a very technical crowd. We don't need to do a technical deep dive and talk about all the network layers, etc. We'll touch upon it, but my main goal today is to have people sort of walk away with, here's some of the new attack vectors, the largest attack vector that we've been seeing in the larger markets, and we serve 14 regions right this minute. So we have a lot of compliance customers. We have a lot of hospital verticals. We have a lot of medical, pharma, banking. We serve a lot of groups that I'm interfacing with at all times. And the primary goal is the business of security and how does keeping compliant and keeping these layers of protection in place help all of us who are tasked with securing some sort of infrastructure be better at what we do. So I'm going to talk about today the largest rising attack vector right now that we're seeing within the data center infrastructure is denial of service or distributed denial of service attacks. Having groups come in, having pipelines saturated, and having a layer in place that gives you some sort of ability to sleep at night knowing that a 10 or 20 or 40 or now we're seeing 100 and 200 gigabit attacks becoming more and more commonplace. There's not a lot of businesses in the world that I know of who have a more robust pipeline than 100 or 200 gigabit attack would allow to continue operating. So there's some things some best practices, some things that are out there, and the more we understand how these attacks happen and why these attacks happen, the better prepared we are to look into it. So there's a few reasons that cyber attacks happen. There's been a lot of information in the news lately with some personal websites that have been hacked. They say it's an insider job. There's a lot of embarrassing information that gets out there. There's a lot of information out there that's floating that we as security professionals need to be aware of. What are the layers and why are they coming in? So essentially there's the criminal aspect. Everybody understands what they're looking for. They're trying to gain access to your credit cards, to your banking information. They're trying to profit directly off of stealing your information or your client's information. There's the hacktivists. This relates right back to what we're going to consider Ashley Madison. There's nothing illegal about going on a website to search for married men and women. What they're doing now is going after these sites saying, here's the layers that you promised to put in place, here's a security flaw that we found, and here's how we're going to exploit it in the hopes of shutting down this business. They didn't ask for a penny. All they said is that your site's bad, we don't agree with it, turn it off. And Ashley Madison, as a thriving business, said we're gonna roll the dice. Turns out they made the wrong choice. I'm assuming there's gonna be Chapter 7 filings within the next 4 or 5 months because they're not gonna be able to absorb all the lawsuits coming out of this. But they're looking for something that's directly tied into what their moral beliefs are. Anonymous, everybody in here is familiar with Anonymous and what their layers happen. Does everybody know where Anonymous and how they started sending their communications? Is there anybody in here who is tied deep into what their communication protocols are and where they started? So there's a website called 4chan. Has everybody heard of 4chan? 4chan is a website sharing, photo sharing site. Pretty debaucherous when you dig deep into some of the inner workings of what 4chan offers. There's a directory in there that is 100% user-fed. And within this user-fed directory, there are no accounts or passwords needed in order to send your information. So everybody who posts to this posts as anonymous. And that's one of the launching pads of how these groups would go in and communicate with each other in the hopes of either sharing information, stealing information, and they would embed their code into graphics, and those graphic codes would then be uploaded into this anonymous site, posted as anonymous, and it was a method of communication with other hackers on how they would distribute this information. So they would take insignificant bits within graphics, and it literally, if I wanted to give you a picture of a white background, only 4 of those 8 bits are necessary for the computer screen to present to you a white background. The other 4 bits, the insignificant bits, could be 0000, AAAA, or I could make them PAUL. And then the next pixel, I could make my last name. And then we can start building within these graphic files, it's known as steganography, an entire map of what we wanted somebody who had the keys to unlock it, what we wanted them to see out of this. Unfortunately, this trick was learned from activists overseas who would use steganography to coordinate Excel files and documents necessary for attacks against US interests. So the United States Department of Defense had a vested interest in understanding the algorithms and the things that went into steganography, and it came back to what these hacktivists actually had the ability to get into and control. Espionage. We get attacked from China and Russia approximately 200 times an hour in our national defense grid and our corporate infrastructures that deal with national defense. Is anybody in here defense contractors? Anybody have defense contracts directly? I assume that you see traffic from China and Russia all the time. We block probably 200 to 250 IP addresses within the tier point corporate infrastructure every single day because we see attack vectors that are sniffing, looking to launch attacks, looking to do something within our infrastructure that serves our corporate clients and our Department of Defense clients. And that's part of the things that we have to be aware of every single day. The number of countries that have the capability to hack into US and corporate interests are growing exponentially. It used to be 5 years ago, North Korea couldn't build a car, and now they have absolutely some of the finest hackers and political espionage groups in the world. In North Korea, if you're an elite hacker, you're treated like a king. You're given a house, you're given everything that you need because you're serving an infrastructure that the North Koreans can't build on their own. You're serving the ability for them to go out and gain knowledge and gain information that would take them a century to build up without the ability to go out and steal it from other countries. And then we have war. There's obviously countries in this world who have a direct interest in not liking the American way of life. So we do have countries that are coming in and looking for not just our national intelligence secrets, but our military secrets. How many subs are out in the ocean? How many carriers? What sort of missiles are they carrying? The Aegis Missile Control System is an infrastructure that gets swept and pinged almost daily. And because of that, the control mechanisms and all of the information that this particular military system runs on gets changed almost every hour, just to try and keep ahead of the other countries that are looking for information that would give them the ability to come in and try and search that information on us. So the DDoS attack is one of the new weapons of choice. And why is it the new weapon of choice? Well, depending on where in your infrastructure you put your protective mechanisms, depends on how long you can absorb a distributed denial of service. So there's companies out there that write malware and take over corporate and personal infrastructure. People click on all sorts of things they're not supposed to within the internet, and it downloads a small piece of code that allows a malicious user to take over and add your system into a botnet. And that botnet, whether you have a 25 megabit connection at home or a gigabit connection at home, that bot sits there waiting and does nothing until the code is needed and executed. On average, when a hacker has a piece of malicious code sitting within your infrastructure, it sits there for 204 days before it's ever touched. So they know that they're in there, they know that they have control of your system if they need it, and on average 204 days later, there's an attack set up where your computer is close enough and within the right IP range or within the right routing infrastructure that it's called upon, that it's hit. More than likely it's happening at 2 in the morning and you're not even monitoring or aware of the fact that now your system is running malicious code, your CPU and RAM cycles are added to the attack, and you're part of what is now becoming, again, a 40, 50, 100 gigabit attack vector that is very difficult for corporations to defend upon. Low-cost DDoS campaigns are one of the newest methods of getting these attacks out there. So what happens is that you, as somebody who, let's say you break ranks with your company and it's a revenge attack, for basically $200, you can go out to the dark web and you can rent a distributed denial of service attack against any one IP you want for an hour. So for $200, you can attack any corporate infrastructure that you know the IP address and just get it to go. So if you and 10 of your friends each want to kick in $200, you're essentially going to saturate most small corporate networks and bring them to a crawl. Once those corporate networks get saturated, the way that these attacks work is that the firewalls can't keep up. When the firewalls reboot, because there's too much attack traffic for their CPU cycles to stay ahead of, the systems reboot, and most Cisco and Fortinet firewalls put in a default configuration file on reboot in order to start doing some sort of home check to see what's going on within the infrastructure. They count on this because once that reboot happens and a configuration file as part of this botnet gets forced down, that configuration file has its own code and its own changes within the configuration file that allow it to then become compromised, and now the attackers have full access into that firewall or router. China, Germany, and the US account for more than 50% of the DDoS attacks that originate going out. And the United States takes part in these attacks against other infrastructures just as much as other countries take part in attacking us. So on the Internet of Things, there's a couple direct platforms that are more vulnerable than others that we see as a data center company getting attacked more and more. So the software as a service platform, the largest attack vectors are within the gaming industry. Does anybody here serve the gaming industry? So the gaming industry, Xbox, PlayStation, all the computer games, it's a highly competitive industry. And one of the keys to staying ahead of that competitive is all of the source algorithms that are used in order to make sure that your gaming graphics, your game design, your infrastructure is ahead of that of your competition. So we see the most attacks against the gaming industry. Software and technology industries come as a very short second to that. Software companies and intellectual property are key targets for hackers who want to exploit this code and use it in order to sell that intellectual property on the open market and try and make money back from it. So it used to be that we would always worry a few years ago against layer 1 and layer 2 attacks. These are the attacks that the traffic is moving upon, and these are the attack vectors that corporate infrastructure relies upon for moving communications. Now, 90% of these attacks in 2005 were layer 1 or layer 2 attacks. Now we're seeing in 2015, 90% of the new attacks that come through across layer 1 and layer 2 infrastructure are going for layer 7 applications. The hackers have realized, and corporate America has realized, that the real intellectual property that happens within our corporate infrastructure lives and operates within these custom applications that the companies design. So we're seeing brand new attack vectors that we didn't see a couple years ago, specifically designed to try and get in and exploit application layers within our internet infrastructure. So what does that mean? The attack vectors that have truly emerged in the last 2 years based on looking for layer 7 attacks are web-based attacks. The most insecure entry point into most clients' infrastructure is their website. Most websites still don't practice a secure coding methodology. Most websites still don't practice the ability to truly lock down the SQL databases that live behind them. So cross-site scripting attacks, things that are specifically designed to come in nice and slow, to run specific scripts, and to try and exploit an open vulnerability that Microsoft is going to patch once a month, are the new attack vectors that we see now. Organizations reporting attacks look at web application logs and look at the attack vectors against those, and the sophisticated hacker now, the first thing they do when they get into a system and successfully attack is to wipe out the log files. And if anybody in this room thinks about it, the last thing I do when I break into a company, when they hire TierPoint and myself to break in and do a security audit, the last thing I do as I'm leaving their computer systems is to wipe the log files that are stored locally. This way there's as little trace of me being in there as possible. by all means, anybody in this room who controls an infrastructure, ship your log files off-site or use a third-party log aggregating server so that your log files are not just sitting on the local machine. And then the DNS volumetric attacks. By flooding these networks and causing the mayhem within the firewalls, that's the first mechanism to them getting through your infrastructure and being able to launch the next layer of attacks that happen. There's a brand new attack vector that we're dealing with across mostly the financial and the pharma company, and this is SSDP, Simple Service Discovery Protocol. It is a very simple protocol designed so that TVs, routers, things that the network, everybody who has seen these home networks where you simply push the little blue button and it goes out and discovers everything on your network and says, here's a very simple hash algorithm I created for you to automatically connect to Wi-Fi and connect all your corporate infrastructure or all your home infrastructure. Unfortunately, that same protocol is in corporate and not military anymore, but in corporate environments where that same service is running to allow it to go out and snoop the network and sniff the network and try and find where all these devices are. There's new attack vectors in place that reflect against and amplify that service. And once it starts giving you the list, there's subnets and things that are normally protected. The new exploits for these allow it to go out and start searching /29/26 network infrastructure based on this protocol to sniff well outside of the secure infrastructure that you just have this router or Wi-Fi connected to. We talked about multi-vector attacks. More than 50% of attack campaigns deployed 5 or more attack vectors in 2014. So again, it's not just a layer 1 volume attack that's coming in to hit the infrastructure. There's usually 4 to 5 different layers and 4 to 5 different attack vectors that are used to successfully exploit a corporation. We send a volume of data and a flood to try and overrun your routers and firewalls. And then we run exploits against your websites and your SQL databases to see where those security flaws sit on the back end. And then we run sniffers on the network to try and see who's connected, who's not patched, what vulnerabilities exist out there, and what malware is already in place in order for us to try and exploit. And again, the exploit is not immediate, 204 days. If I take control of every computer for every person in this room, I'm not going to just take control of that computer and start doing something immediately. The volume and the money in hacking is by taking all of your systems together as a collective and then using that collective to go after high profile, high target value. This one I'm going to read to you. I hate reading my screen, but this is important. Years ago, DDoS attacks mostly targeted the network through SYN, TCP, UDP, and ICMP floods. From 2010 to 12, there was an increase in more sophisticated application-level attacks and SSL encryption-based attacks. Recently, a specific type of denial-of-service attack, the amplification reflective flood, has not only revived network attacks, but also given attackers an edge over their counterparts who target those applications. So reflective attacks, including attacks against DNS, NTP, and Trojan, started heating up in 2013 and have remained the most active attack methodology today. Who knows why just having your website IP address blocked does not really matter during a DDoS attack. Most DDoS attacks against web infrastructure follow the DNS servers that point to your domain. So when people get attacked, their websites start getting flooded, it's natural for you to say, well, let's just change the IP, re-announce those routes. But once you have a DNS server out there that's announcing to the world, here's how we're routing back into that web infrastructure, the attacks have the ability to follow. So we'll see attacks hit a website, come down significantly as we look to change IPs and mitigate. And then once the DNS servers catch up, without having to make any changes again, the web attacks automatically start amplifying again. It's a vicious cycle. DDoS attacks. Small, medium business, $52,000 per incident is the average. So the initial attack takes less than 2 minutes to compromise a small medium infrastructure that has a gigabit or 2 gigabits worth of external data feeding its data centers. Less than 2 minutes. The initial time to compromise the data from within there is 2 minutes after that. So now we're looking at 2 minutes to get into a gigabit or 2 gigabit infrastructure and another 2 minutes to discover and compromise data on the servers that sit within this environment. From there, it takes about 4 days to 2 weeks to take that data, scrub that data, turn it into something that's sellable on the open market, and to start making money on the attack that you launched against a 1 or 2 gigabit small network. So we're not talking a ton of time or a ton of resources necessary for these clients who get into smaller businesses to start doing something with this data and turn that attack into an immediate profit center. Most of the larger corporate infrastructure, this matters. 11% of the companies, the larger corporate infrastructure in this country, would lose 1 million plus in revenue for every hour of sustained distributed denial of service attack, keeping their corporate networks and their internal spanning networks from reaching other locations and other areas. So larger companies that have multi-present sites that are within 10 or 12 different locations around this country, maybe 10 or 12 different locations around the world. We're looking at $1 million in revenue per hour for a sustained attack. Server application threats. More than the types of attacks that we've already gone on are level 7 application software vulnerabilities. So as I said, it used to be level 1 and level 2, layer 1 and layer 2 attacks were the norm. Now we're looking at attacks that come in on layer 7, go after the actual operating system, go into the OS layer, go into the application layer and run known exploits against the application code that these sites were built on. If you build your site on PHP, if you build your business against as a web provider, if you're looking at SQL backends, all of these things have vulnerabilities that are not patched every day. The ability to go in and look at zero-day attacks and to use that information in order to launch. Yes, sir.
So, when you, I assume you're working for various clients doing this.
Yes, sir.
So, what percentage of clients would you say are fully patched, at least current, as current as it can be, on the critical patches, and how does that figure to help? Say you find a client that is not current, how does that figure on the ease with which you guys can do?
I would say that less than 20% of our clients are patched to within a 30-day window. So one of the easiest ways to learn how to attack an application is Microsoft Tuesday. So if I'm going to attack Windows Server 2012, I'm looking at approximately 18 million lines of code to try and digest and figure out what my attack vectors are. On Microsoft Patch Tuesday, they provide me a very easy list of all of the vulnerabilities that have been brought to Microsoft's attention that they've gone in and fixed. Well, now Microsoft Patch Tuesday gives me 50 different lists of maybe 200 to 300 lines of code that show me exactly where the flaw was, what they did to fix it, and basically they've given us a roadmap on how to exploit it.
So, second question.
Sure.
Assuming that the systems that you're working for a client that they are fully patched, they're current.
Yeah.
How much more difficult does that make your job beginning?
Exponentially more difficult. Most of the attacks are based on the fact that we're reactive, not proactive. So hackers we take advantage of flaws out there. There's some large hacking groups that are now hiring code developers in order to stay ahead of their code, their malicious applications. It's very few and far between, and honestly, they really just want government infrastructure. The corporate environment, the hackers that want to try and exploit and take advantage of corporate environments, they're usually within a 30 to 60-day window. So adopting a very strict 30-day patch management system is something that's going to save you, honestly, probably 95% of the headaches of the people that are just out there sweeping the networks looking for layer 7 application attacks. Also, unfortunately, what we in the hacking community call them script kiddies. A lot of these companies have put out remote algorithms that allow anybody who looks up on Google, how to take advantage, how to launch malware, etc. Most of these are younger kids, younger people who are looking to try and play. A lot of them are people who are looking to secure their own corporate infrastructure based on these little canned packages. Unfortunately, most of these canned packages are put out by governments or hacking agencies, and they contain malware themselves. So in the process of downloading this, go ahead and launch this one program that's for free, and it's number 10 on the Google rankings, what you're really doing is infecting your own computer, running malware that's going out and sniffing all of the networks that you might have credential to, and again, just adding to the problem. A lot of the facts that when you're patched and updated, it prevents that sort of application attack layer, especially against the operating system. If you have custom software and you don't follow secure coding, there's nothing that can be done for you. If you leave cross-site scripting open, if you're not diligent about how your databases communicate with your actual presentation servers, you're always going to have vulnerabilities. But the operating system layer and the application layer, as it feeds back to relational databases, et cetera, is a huge key in keeping your infrastructure secure. So some of the outlines and how these attacks happen. So we have perimeter. Most data centers and most companies that house within data centers, we have layers of security that are mandated for us to operate as a business. So I have, because we peer with most of the larger internet providers, I have within my networks, my perimeter, my edge network. My edge network are huge fiber, robust, 40 plus gigabit routing infrastructure that allows me to pass traffic, allows me to feed huge pipelines into my data centers, and allows my data centers to communicate amongst themselves in a secure fashion. I don't know how other data centers do it. I know how some data centers do it. We have adopted a dark fiber network within our infrastructure because we serve so many high-profile clients. That dark fiber infrastructure in many of our locations, and it's building out to all our locations, we actually light it ourselves. We don't even rely on third-party companies to come in and use their lit service as our primary communications. We spent the money on the Equinox equipment, and we light 10 gig fiber paths on a dark fiber ring that we own so that we can have a priv management network between our infrastructure that's not exposed to the outside world. Most companies don't have that luxury. They don't have the ability to spend that kind of money and build that out. So now you're relying on lit service that has other internet traffic traversing against it. So your data center perimeter, your edge routing, is your first line of defense for most of the attacks that are going to be hitting you. So the envelopes attacks, the direct attacks, the things that are coming in against that edge router are mostly layer 1 and layer 2. They're the larger volume attacks looking to see where there's an exploit that can be run. Second from that is, as we say, the application attacks. Once we get through your edge routing, there's some sort of core routing. So anybody who has an internet connection here who has a robust network, you have your edge, and then you have some sort of firewall system. That firewall system is what gets compromised during a denial of service attack, and then we have our core routing infrastructure internal to the corporation. The core routing infrastructure is where the application attacks, the floods that have gotten through the first layer. Usually the core routing infrastructure is not nearly as robust as the edge routing infrastructure. It doesn't need to be. It's just a gigabit connection that's usually handling traffic within your corporation. Once we take down a firewall and get into the core routing, that's where all of the direct attacks happen within a corporate or government infrastructure. That's where we go in and we steal server information. That's where Sony got hit. Once their core routing was compromised and they could get through into all the server systems, that's when we can just play. It's an open forum at that point. It's as if I'm sitting within your network and I have administrative credentials and I can go snoop anywhere I want. So depending on how your application layers and how your Active Directory setup is, if we can, and Active Directory servers are usually very well advertised. So if we can compromise the Active Directory server and force our way into that server rebooting and put in our own GPOs, we basically own the network. And again, as we saw before, it usually takes less than 2 hours for that to happen, for us to own the network and for us to be able to start running exploits against all the application servers we can find. So the detection and the ability to stop this type of attack is key out on the edge routing. The further out from your internal network you can put your protection scheme, the better off you're going to be as a corporation or as a security professional that's in charge of a corporation in protecting their critical infrastructure. The biggest thing that we sell, our largest selling package at TierPoint for security, is a scrubbing system that protects the edge routing of our clients. And by that I mean we have denial of service boxes and scrubbing centers that protect all of the DNS and announced IP routes that come into our infrastructure. We have web application firewalls that are fully managed on behalf of clients in order to protect that infrastructure. And we have log aggregation and review that has real-time eyes on it. It's not just an algorithmic process that if the algorithm picks it up, it kicks off to the next layer. Real-time eyes in the sky on log aggregation to see if there's an abnormality, that there was a weakness in the DDoS mitigation, the protection layers out on the edge, or any of the web application firewalls that are in place in order to protect the servers themselves. Don't assume you're not a target. How many people in this room have denial of service mitigation devices sitting in front of their networks? 3, 4 people? So out of everybody in this room, most of you, I would assume, have some sort of duty to protect data or manage data on behalf of your own company or corporation. The fact that there's no denial of service mitigation package in front of the infrastructure that feeds your networks makes you a prime target for hackers to come in and try and gain entry into that location. And hackers know immediately whether you have a protection algorithm in there because these mitigation systems sit in line. So the whole goal of them is to be transparent. Whether you use Radware or Arbor or whatever package you're choosing, they sit in line and they're transparent to the clean data coming in. It's once it picks up some sort of attack mechanism, whether it be UDP or a SYN attack or whatever the methodology used, once it picks that up, it automatically is set within nanoseconds to start rerouting that traffic into a scrubbing center to try and detect and understand what the attack vector is, where it's coming from, and what mitigation pieces need to be in place immediately to try and keep it safe and secure. Protecting your data is not the same as protecting your business. Everybody's business investments and everybody's business intellectual property is what they use in order to go make money as a corporation. The systems that are in place to make the business of business happen on the back end in order to feed the infrastructure that allows that to go through to the corporate world, that's what this room, I hope, or that's what we as security professionals are tasked with protecting. Everything is fine as long as there's no attack and your data doesn't get breached. I can tell you that being the security officer for multi-tiers of companies, you're a hero if you absorb an attack. It's the one attack that gets through and damages your infrastructure. 10 years of being spotless and never having a blip on the radar is immediately flushed with one attack that gets through and takes corporate data outside of your network infrastructure. Can't protect what you can't detect. You can't defend against attacks you can't detect. Again, it sounds like a broken record and I apologize. I can't say it strongly enough. Putting protection as far out on the edge of your infrastructure is key to protecting the internals of that infrastructure. You don't have to go buy $200,000 scrubbing centers in order to protect your infrastructure. Most of the larger denial of service attack or firewall integration systems allow you very clearly to just rent it as a cloud service. You re-announce your DNS they are in line for a fairly low monthly fee, looking at sniffing and protecting the traffic coming into your infrastructure. And if an attack does happen, it automatically cleans and scrubs the data and protects your infrastructure from an attack long before it ever makes it into the edge routing infrastructure that you own. Look at solutions. The point of this is that I wanted to point out very clearly that the layer 1, layer 2 denial of service attacks are now the new master for getting into all the other attack vectors that happen within your network. I don't own a DDoS company, we just use some of them, so I'm not here selling you on one DDoS solution or another. I'm asking that you look at that infrastructure as far out on your network as possible. And know your limitations. If you are not a security professional or you haven't designed networks to be resilient against attacks, by all means seek the help of a corporate individual or security individual who can outline and map this in order to make sure that your network is resilient. It's not enough to just plug in one copper cable and plug in another copper cable on the other end and say that you're protected. There's network failover, there's things that need to be in place in order to make sure that if something happens, you still have resiliency and internal network operations that allow your infrastructure to stay running. That's it. I want to end with one quick story. We were lucky enough to take part as a defense contractor with the Department of Defense testing brand new firewall systems for an Israeli security firm. So in order to have a new firewall system that comes out in the United States, it has to be tested by the Department of Defense and the NSA, and you have to reveal the algorithms you use in order to make sure that it meets standards and or has some sort of fail-safe backdoor in case it's used against our defense integration network. There were 8 or 10 companies that were asked to do this test. One of those 8 companies was our company, and we were given 1 hour before the attack could happen a phone call that had the actual IP address of the brand new firewall system that was unhackable that we were going to launch attacks against. So building up to this, there were phone calls, communications, and then on the day we were ready to go, we could use whatever methodologies we wanted to try and break this new Israeli firewall system. The only caveat is that we had to share with everybody what we used, how we broke it, and how deep we could get. So 1 hour before everything's ready to go, we get a phone call. It says, here's the IP address, send it to your team, and here's the time that you can start attacking. So everybody got a different IP address leading into a different system, but it was the same backbone. So now we're on the countdown. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, go. We hit it with every attack vector we could. We launched denial of service against it. We had about 17 gigabit worth of attack vectors going against this machine. We got through the first layer. Needless to say, our team, team number 8, compromised this brand new unhackable firewall in 11 minutes. We could not be more proud of ourselves. We're on the phone. We're in, and the gentleman answering the phone for the Department of Defense said, yeah, you didn't win. We didn't win. Who won? So the team that won was a team out of Seattle, and this team compromised this brand new server in less than 6 minutes. Less than 6 minutes they own this server, and we're all on the phone now. Everybody eventually is on the phone. The contest is over. Whether you got in or not, you stopped attacking because the contest is over. And we're all listening to this phone call where we hear them saying, get them back on the phone, let them know they won. And then there's about a 5-second pause, and somebody, I have no idea who, in the background says, they've been on the phone since 5 seconds after this started. They can't get into their systems. What do you mean they can't get into their systems? 5 seconds after we gave them the go-ahead to launch, they called us saying they can't get into their systems. Here's what happened. This company, who was a security-based company, had been compromised by a 16-year-old Taiwanese hacker about 150 days before this event. That Taiwanese hacker was reading every single email and monitoring every SIP-based phone call that came across this company's network. So this 16-year-old Taiwanese hacker, using a 2005 Centrino-based laptop running his own custom security Linux, compromised their environment, listened to the phone calls, and then took control of the attacking infrastructure probably 30 seconds before they were given the launch, ran his own attack vectors from Taiwan through this server infrastructure and compromised that server. All of these layers happened in 6 minutes. And this company was a premier security company that served the United States government who got attacked by this 16-year-old. So I don't know exactly how that story, I love just telling the story for the shock value. From what I understand, there was a helicopter en route to pick this kid up within 2 hours of this thing ending. And my understanding is now he is a security professional on behalf of the NSA. Thank you all for your time. Are there any questions for me from anybody? You all feel nice and secure now? Everybody's happy? Sir.
So in your research that you're working with companies on multi-vector attacks, are you able to either anecdotally or when a DDoS attack is happening, you're able to see from a corporate standpoint, is there any correlation to DDoS attacks that increase malware, increases things like that?
There are. One of the biggest correlations that we've seen is, unfortunately, the DDoS attacks that tie directly to increased malware come from countries that have military interests against the United States infrastructure. So when we see attacks originating from China, China Telecom basically funds the hacking infrastructure within China. And China Telecom has unlimited bandwidth and unlimited IP addresses, and it's big business there. So we do see very clear evidence that hacking coming in from China that results in corporate infrastructure is tied directly to the same groups that attack military infrastructure and use the corporate infrastructure to create botnets to then turn around and attack the military infrastructure. There's a very clear correlation between them.
On one of your slides, for the companies or countries with DDoS the most, I saw the USA, China, and then Germany. I was surprised to see Germany.
Germany controls a lot of the fiber infrastructure for Europe. So it may not be originating from Germany itself. If it's originating from Europe or some of the Russian infrastructure, it's coming from a German vector. Yes. Excellent. Everybody enjoy your lunch. Thank you very much. Oh, sir. Sorry.
Is there a Zachariah Grooms in the room? Got something you want?
Thank you, everybody.